Hello friends, welcome back to another video about books. I am your host, and today we are talking about a book called Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. It is a great honor for me to talk about her work because she's one of my favorite authors. I have read all of her books and they have been life-changing for me. She is a storyteller, an award-winning speaker, and a researcher. She has written several books that focus on topics like vulnerability, courage, shame, and empathy. And I highly recommend you watch the videos I've done on some of her other books, especially The Gifts of Imperfection. It changed my life. And this particular book, Dare to Lead, it looks at the subject of leadership from a whole new perspective. You know, we think of leaders as these people who are in charge of big things or organizations or countries. But Brené Brown says, no, everybody can be a leader in their own way. And this book will teach you how to be a good leader, not just for yourself, but also for others around you. Let me share with you the idea that I got from this book that I thought was absolutely brilliant. In this book, Brown talks about something called living into our values. What does that mean? Well, let's take a step back and define what values actually are. Values are basically the principles that guide our decisions and our actions. They are the things that we hold to be important and true, and we all have them, whether we are leaders or not. Sometimes we even write them down and put them up on our walls, like on our vision boards. You know, things like family, faith, creativity, or justice. However, here's where things get interesting. Having values is one thing, but living into them is a whole different story. And that's what Brown really focuses on in this book. How do we go from simply saying we believe in certain values to actually living a life that reflects those values every single day? Because isn't it possible that we can say that we value something like honesty, for example, but then find ourselves lying or keeping secrets all the time? Or we might say we care about helping others, but then ignore the needs of people around us. So, how do we make sure that our actions match up with what we say we believe in? Brown points out that we tend to struggle with living into our values for a number of reasons. One of the biggest challenges, according to her research, is that we often have a hard time identifying what our core values actually are. And this makes sense because there are so many things that we could potentially value, you know, like being successful, or having lots of money, or impressing people. So, how do we decide which ones are most important to us? For example, if you ask me what my core values are, I would say that compassion, empathy, and kindness are really important to me, as well as being authentic and genuine. Those are my core values. But somebody else might say, no, success and ambition and power are what drive them. So we all have to figure out what is important to us and what we want to focus on. Another challenge Brown points out is that even when we do know our values, we may not be able to live into them because of our emotions. Like maybe we feel insecure or afraid or jealous or bitter. And those feelings don't always line up with the values that we want to live by. Like say you're a teacher and you value kindness and empathy, but then you get to school one morning and one of your students is being really mean and disrespectful, and you start to feel angry and resentful. That is a situation where you can see that your emotions aren't really matching up with the values that you want to live by. And finally, Brown acknowledges that sometimes our environments and circumstances can make it hard to live into our values. Like maybe you're working in a place where the culture is really competitive and individualistic, but you value collaboration and community. So you can see how the environment that you're in does not exactly support the values that you want to live by. So those are some of the reasons why it can be difficult to live into our values. We might not even know what our values are. We might be struggling with our emotions, or we might be in an environment that doesn't support the values that we want to live by. So how do we overcome these challenges and really live a life that reflects our values every single day? Well, Brown offers some really practical advice. First, she encourages us to clarify what our values actually are. We have to take the time to reflect and really think about what is important to us and what we want to focus on. This is not an easy task, but it is essential if we want to live into our values. We have to know what they are first. Second, Brown recognizes that we need to be aware of our emotions and how they affect our ability to live into our values. Like I said before, sometimes our feelings don't really line up with the values that we want to live by. So we need to be aware of that and develop strategies for dealing with those emotions in a healthy way. For example, if we're feeling insecure or jealous or bitter, we need to find ways to process those emotions in a way that does not harm ourselves or the people around us. And third, Brown acknowledges that sometimes our environments and circumstances can make it hard to live into our values. Like she said, if we're working in a place where the culture is really competitive and individualistic, but we value collaboration and community, we need to be willing to change our environment, or at least change the way that we interact with our environment. Maybe we can find ways to create more community and collaboration within our current environment. Or maybe we need to look for a new job or a new school. So those are the three main things that Brown says we need to do in order to live into our values. Clarify our values, be aware of our emotions, and change our environment or circumstances if necessary. Now, this is not easy stuff. It takes a lot of self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and courage to live into our values, especially when things get tough or when we're feeling challenged. But Brown argues that it's worth it because living into our values leads to a more meaningful and fulfilling life. You know, when we're living in a way that is true to our values, we feel a sense of purpose and direction. We feel like we're making a difference in the world, and that gives us a lot of energy and motivation to keep going, even when things get hard. On the other hand, when we're not living into our values, we can feel lost and directionless. We might feel like we're just going through the motions day after day, just trying to get by. And that can lead to a lot of burnout and discouragement. One of the best things about Brown's book is that she doesn't just talk about these ideas. She also gives us tools and resources for putting them into practice. For example, she has a whole chapter on how to have difficult conversations in a way that is courageous but also compassionate. And she has another chapter on how to cultivate shame resilience. Shame resilience is basically the ability to recognize and accept our own humanity, including our imperfections and our mistakes. And Brown argues that shame resilience is essential for living into our values, because when we're feeling ashamed, we're not likely to be at our best. Overall, I think that Dare to Lead is a really insightful and practical book. I think that Brown's ideas about living into our values is a really helpful way of thinking about how to live a more purposeful and meaningful life. So I encourage you to check out this book and to think about how you can apply these ideas to your own life. And remember that you can also sign up to our newsletter and download the free guide that goes along with this video. It'll help you remember the key points and also apply them to your life. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this in the future. Have a great day. Bye.